Good morning, my name is Nick, and I will be arguing the negative side of this current issue. Start off with the humanitarian aid and how it must be backed by the military. It's hard to argue against the fact that there is no protection for the aid given, if there is no protection for the aid given, that the safety of both the people and the funds are in danger. There does not need to be troops. There does need to be troops to maintain safety, but does it have to be U.S. troops? If the U.S. sends troops for the protection of humanitarian aid missions, then that puts U.S. lives in danger and leads to higher death tolls than there already is. You talk about the funding of housing and supplies and how those assets need protection, but there would be no refugee issue in the first place if the civilian populace did not have to fear for their lives from both mass killings by the IS and U.S.-led air raids. There are two main reasons there is a refugee problem, and that's both of those, mass killings and the U.S.-led air raids. The U.S. leads the entire coalition of air raids, so any misdrops fall back on them. Moving on to the lack of U.S. troops causes regional instability. U.S. withdrawal from Iraq in 2011 caused a power vacuum. There wouldn't have been a power gap to be filled if the U.S. hadn't been in Iraq in the first place. No matter how long we stay there, there's going to be a gap that needs to be filled. So committing troops to Syria would mean that we are setting ourselves up for failure. That is, the U.S. does not have a long-term strategy or an exit strategy, but Russia does. Putin's backing of Assad means that there is someone to step in when Russia eventually pulls out. While Assad is not ideal, he's the lesser of two evils. Your proposal for U.S. troops was to protect U.S. humanitarian aid efforts, not to become the power broker. This just goes to show that no matter how we enter with troops, it's just going to lead to U.S. leading the charge in the ground fighting against IS, which is going to eventually create the power vacuum when the U.S. leaves Syria and Iraq. Russia has already begun construction of their second air station, which means that once that's up and running, they're committing more of a ground force than they already have there. Yes, Russia is wanting to get involved for their own personal interests, and the number one interest is Putin's initial backing of Assad. If Assad loses to Putin, then Putin looks incompetent, and they are going to do whatever they need to ensure an Assad victory. Russian intervention seeks only personal interests, is what Jacob was saying. The U.S. has been distributing arms to Syria already in an effort to arm their military so our ground troops don't have to get involved. And he says that Russia's main goal is to get the arms deal contracts. You say Russia doesn't have a long-term plan which galvanizes the Islamic State, but in all actuality they do, and the U.S. does not. Right now, the U.S.'s plan is to fund forces fighting Syrian government forces to take Assad out of power, but we don't have a plan to fill that void. Moving on to airstrikes U.S. airstrikes being ineffective. How can U.S. airstrikes be effective when they're killing innocent civilians? Are the lives of two civilian children expendable because an airstrike kills 100 Islamic State militants? No, they are not. Any innocent lives that are lost due to American-led airstrikes takes away from the effectiveness of the strike, being that the goal is to eliminate the Islamic State forces in order to protect the innocent civilians. A civilian is not being protected when their life is lost in the process. An article off of Teleserve, there's been nearly 4 million innocent civilians the United States and their allies have killed during this so-called war on terror. In March, Washington, D.C.-based Physicians for Social Responsibility, a group of Nobel Peace Prize recipients, released a report saying that the U.S. interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan alone killed close to 2 million, and that the figure was closer to 4 million when tallying up the deaths of civilians caused by the U.S. in other countries such as Syria and Yemen. From the New York Times, the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights has estimated that 181 civilians have been killed in the coalition airstrike campaign against Islamic State as of mid-August. Other groups have given higher estimates, and all say the United States and its allies understate the civilian toll. The United States Central Command says it has confirmed deaths of only 2 civilians since the start of the campaign. And those 2 were children. The Russian strategy is more effective than the U.S. strategy. Last month, Russia announced an intelligence sharing agreement with Syria, Iran, and Iraq in their fight against Islamic State. A move the New York Times said caught U.S. officials completely off guard. It was another sign, Michael Gordon wrote, that Russia was moving ahead with a sharply different tack from that of the Obama administration in battling the Islamic State by assembling a rival coalition that includes Iran and the Syrian government. The U.S. is trying to take out the Syrian government with no replacement in mind. The American policy, as of news.com, American policy has sought to straddle the motivations of all parties and is therefore on the verge of losing the ability to shape events. The U.S. is now opposed to or at odds in some way or another with all parties in the region, with Egypt on human rights, with Saudi Arabia over Yemen, with each of Syrian parties over different objectives. When asked whether America had failed, Professor Williams said, "I don't think its strategy in the Middle East is very effective." Thank you.